Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast for February 11th, Monday. We're talking AAF football, the new football league. Robbie Vino watched it. Robbie Vino handicapped it, and he's got his power rankings coming out. He's going to release them on Twitter and on sportsmemo.com. But without further ado, Robbie, welcome into the podcast. How are you?
I am doing good today, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Good weekend. The betting boards have been kind to me of late, and hopefully again tonight. And guys, it's $9 Monday, so check out sportsmemo.com. All plays, including 5% plays, normally $30, discounted to just $9 every Monday at sportsmemo.com. Great day to check out the site. Robbie, over the weekend, and guys, we're going to be talking AAF for this upcoming week, a little recap, and then some college basketball for tonight's slate at the end. But Robbie, what did you notice first week here of the new football league?
Well, if we start from a gambling standpoint, a point spread betting, handicapping standpoint, where totals are concerned here, Drew, in this league, you can throw all your other football totals handicapping in the garbage where key numbers are concerned. There's no extra points in this league. It's all 2-point conversions, so your key numbers become totally different. Touchdowns either land on 6 or 8. They don't land on 7s for the most part. So, when we're doing normal totals handicapping in college football or NFL football, 47, 48, 51, 52, numbers like that, very, very key, very, very common in regular football. But here, a little bit different. You saw it with the totals. They landed 46, 21, 22, and 60. So you'll have to readjust where that's concerned and understand the value of what a new key number is going to be like here in this particular league. The rules changes a little bit different here, starting on the 25-yard line with no kickoffs, so you get no kickoff return. The onside kick, which is now taken out of play here. If you want an onside kick, you have to score, be down by 17, I think it is, with less than 5 minutes left, and you can attempt a 4th and 12 from your own 28-yard line. If you convert, you keep the ball. That's their version of an onside kick. So a lot of things. The play clock is different here, Drew, shorter, 10 seconds shorter to get a playoff, so things move along much quicker in this league than they do in the NFL. A couple, like I say, a lot of stuff. And just generally the play, I thought the play was pretty good. A lot of names that, football junkies like myself recognize, a lot of coaches that we recognize. So for me, I think it can only get better. And ratings-wise, I saw where Saturday night the AAF on CBS outdrew the NBA Saturday Showcase, Oklahoma City and Houston on ABC. So the AAF, one feather in their cap already, outdrawing a big NBA basketball game.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I think Clay Travis tweeted that out, and just how much Americans love football. I'm with you, Robbie. I mean, as far as watching this league, and I was traveling back from Costa Rica, so I didn't see every game. But especially last night, I was watching with my cousin, and he was like, "Oh, who's this guy? Who's this guy?" And I'm like, "Oh, he went to Toledo. He went to and I was just, and I was like, I was loving it. It was like a bunch of small, not small guys, but just names that if you're a college football fan, you recognize some of them, and even some guys got a look in the NFL as well. So I think the play was actually pretty good. The quarterback play, there was some passes that weren't there, but overall, I was pretty impressed by it. Were you?
Yeah, I was too, Drew. And any football guy, anybody who's played it for any length of time, anybody who watches it as intently or intensely as, guys like us in the industry do, you realize that the hardest thing to bring together of all the components of a football team is the offensive line. Those 5 guys have to be completely cohesive, attached as one, and I think that's where we find some of the poor play inside this league and stuff that will improve as an offensive line plays together longer. Quarterback play will get better, more holes will be open for the running game, and so on and so forth. So if I had to point at one thing, and it's pretty easy to figure out offensive line play, which may have led to some of the poor offensive starts for teams this weekend. I think that'll all turn around as the weeks go on and these offensive lines get a little more cohesive. And it's interesting to watch through the penalties get called over the weekend for 6-man blitzes. You can only send 5. And a couple of times I know Bob Sanders, ex-Indianapolis Colt defensive back, got a little excited as the DC for Orlando and sent more than 5 and got these sacks, but you get flagged and penalized 10 or 15 yards for that. So only 5-man. I guess they're trying to protect their quarterbacks. There's not a bunch of them in this league, and you can't have no quarterbacks left by week 3. So just little nuances of the game. But from an overall fundamental standpoint, I think offensive line play has the largest amount to grow and will definitely improve the offensive play of teams as weeks go on.
Yeah, Robbie, I mean, there was some names. I believe Logan Woodside, I heard his name called a couple times. Matt Linehan from Idaho, he was pretty good in the Sun Belt. So there was some guys kind of chucking it around. And, Robbie, looking up at this week, we got week 2 action. I don't believe it's about – all the games are Saturday and Sunday. And the first one here, 2 p.m. on Saturday, we got Salt Lake at Birmingham. So making a little bit of a trek here to the state of Alabama. One way, what are your power ratings on these two teams, and where do you see the line in total, and also your overall view of how you'd look to bet this game?
Yeah, can we absolutely make this the first place each and every week where you'll get at least a number to throw out there? And like you said, Drew, I do have power ratings made. I'll put them up on Twitter, make them available for all those who follow us here at Sportsmemo, and we'll bring them here on the podcast for this Salt Lake City Birmingham game on Saturday at Birmingham, the home favorite here by 4.5. We'll see where the number comes. I did not establish a total for that game right now, but 4.5 the side here. And I think, both of these teams probably reside in that upper echelon after week 1, the top half of the league. Salt Lake City played a very difficult team in the Arizona Hotshots, and while they scored 22, they did allow 38 points in that game. And the one fault and the one thing I'll say about Salt Lake, which was a good offensive team, is that I learned over the years from Oregon football that any defense run by Nick Aliotti, you better either just bet over or not bet at all, because that guy, I was really surprised that he got the job in this league. But beyond that, those defenses at Oregon were sieves. And I think he spent some time at UCLA where the defenses were sieves. So no surprise that his first time out as a defensive coordinator in this league, his defense gives up 38 points. If you're looking at Salt Lake City, I think that over might be a way to bet this team. They're certainly capable on the offensive end, but boy, oh boy, that defensive side of the football was not good. For Birmingham, just the opposite. An extremely good defensive effort, 26-0 win over the Memphis Express. I think things that were most impressive about Birmingham, and I know a lot of people have noticed the same thing, quarterback Luis Perez, who played at Texas A&M Commerce and set all kinds of records, was just a terrific sort of Jared Goff-style quarterback with the sprint outs and the throws on the run and the accuracy. Birmingham also featured Trent Richardson in this game. The ex-Alabama running back didn't have a huge game as far as total yardage is concerned, but touchdown run and a couple of tough carries. You could see that. I don't know if you saw him play, Drew, but Trent Richardson, before he left the NFL, had kind of blown up size-wise and now looks much more in NFL or in football shape. And Birmingham looked pretty good in that contest. Ran the ball hard. They're more of a kind of a 50-50 split team on offense, but the defense played real well. And I would think that for Salt Lake, it's going to be hard for us to tell after 1 week and just looking at results whether the results were the product of playing real good opponents, playing real bad opponents. It's going to take a couple of weeks to decipher what's what. But I think for Salt Lake, they might have faced a softer defense in Arizona. than they did in Birmingham. And I might have said earlier that the DC for Salt Lake was Nick Aliotti. I meant to say Arizona, and that would be one knock against them. So I think here you probably see Birmingham at home in Legion Field. The crowd was good. For anybody who saw the game, they support this football team. I think that crowd will be good again. For Salt Lake, it's more travel, second week in a row on the road. And like I say, early estimate from myself, from my power ratings, would show Birmingham to be -4.5.
All right, good stuff, Robbie. And yeah, in that part of the country, I mean, they love football. The state of Alabama, I know from firsthand experience, so it might be one of the strongest home fields in the league. Might have to factor that in a bunch, especially with Salt Lake making the travel. We got Arizona at Memphis up next. This one's the night game on Saturday night on NFL Network. You just talked about the hot shots, Nick Aliotti and company, but how would you look to bet Arizona at Memphis, Robbie?
Well, they are really an explosive football team. Rick Neuheisel had said in a lot of articles that I read that they planned to come out and throw the football around, and certainly they did, but they ran it really good too, Drew. And when you just watch these four games, you can see sort of philosophical differences amongst the offensive systems here. And for Arizona, wide open, almost anything goes. They've got a really good balance from running to passing. But you were talking a little bit before about names from college that were recognizable. And here, boy, the one that really stuck out for Arizona was quarterback John Wolford. Now, we know him from Wake Forest and that tremendous year he had, his final season at Wake Forest, running the football, throwing the football accurately. And that was a season in which Wake Forest kind of retailored their offense to be much more up-tempo. We see now, this past year, the second year in a row, where Wake Forest runs an awful lot of plays. Each game they run them very quickly. Wolford was the originator of that when they made the switch. And, boy, he ran this offense the same way. 18 of 29, 275 yards, 4 touchdowns, no INTs, extremely accurate. And the commentators on the game, and unlike us, who know an awful lot about the college football personnel, I think some of the announcing teams here weren't quite as familiar with college football personnel because they acted very surprised that Trevor Knight, of course, an Oklahoma quarterback, wasn't the starter here, and John Wolford, a guy that I don't think any of them knew went to Wake Forest, was the starting quarterback, but he proved to be very, very good here. I'll rattle out a couple of more names here that I know you'll recognize. Jarrell Presley, running back for New Mexico, and Bob Davie a couple of years back. Very good game. Larry Rose III, New Mexico State star for a few years. Another running back on that squad. They ran the ball combined. They had, if you count Wolford in the rushing mix, they ran for 159 yards in that game. So they make it difficult on any defense because you just don't know with the RPOs that Wolford can run here. You don't know where they're coming from, run or pass, and that puts Salt Lake on their heels for sure. Matt Linehan, you mentioned for Salt Lake, he came in as the backup quarterback here. Josh Woodrum, the starter, got hurt, and they too ran a couple of NFL running backs out there on this side, Brandon Oliver and Matt Asiata. Matt Asiata, we remember from the Vikings. Brandon Oliver, we remember from the Chargers. Both really good backs. So Arizona, I think offensively, Drew, to sum them up real quick, they are one of the elites. I'd make them and Orlando the elite offenses after the first 2 weeks. No surprise there because they put up the most points. I'm not so sure about them defensively just because, as I said, it looked like a Nick Aliotti defense. It just was full of holes, and Salt Lake City poked at those holes and did pretty good to get their 22 points as well. In this next week's contest, they go to Memphis. I make them a 6-point favorite. That might come out low. My number might be low from where this game opens just because Arizona was made the futures favorite to win this league, to win the championship by odds makers, and then they go out and are really impressive on Sunday night against Salt Lake, and Memphis, of course, gets shut out 26-0, and we know what you saw last matters to the betting public. So I make it 6. I would expect it to maybe come out a little bit higher and maybe the money to carry it a little bit higher. But I do think that there's room for improvement on this Memphis team led by Mike Singletary. The defense played real well. It finally cracked. There's only so much you can do on defense when your offense is constantly 3 and out. I think Christian Hackenberg and company for Memphis only had 77 passing yards in this game, and Hackenberg was a total disaster. So you have to be careful with Memphis because if he's going to remain the quarterback on that team, then I think they're going to continue to have some trouble moving the football. We'll see where they go from here. They had their moments. Mike Singletary wants to run the football. We know his style from the NFL. But in the end, he had to pull Hackenberg. Quarterback from Troy State, Brandon Silvers, came in. It was in mop-up time. It's hard to judge. But I thought overall, in watching it, Zach Stacy ran hard. Remember him from Vanderbilt, right, as we keep rattling off these college players. But they have issues throwing the football, and they have line with protection. So I think Memphis, even though Arizona's defense is a little bit leaky and Memphis may score points this week, I don't think they'll get shut out. It'll be real difficult for them to keep pace with Arizona from what I saw after the first week.
Man, Robbie, yeah, you're naming all these great names. Larry Rose the third, Zach Stacy. These guys, some of these guys, I'm surprised didn't make the NFL or at least get a shot. Did they? Do you know?
Yeah, plenty of them did. In watching the all 4 broadcasts this weekend, they kind of go over where these guys had their cup of coffee in the NFL, why they didn't remain in the NFL, whether it be due to injury or personnel numbers game. But a lot of these broadcasts did a good job of reminding us where these guys were. They had their opportunity. They're trying to get back in. A guy like on Birmingham, Drew, they completed a real long pass play. And, of course, I can't identify names with numbers yet. But the pass reception was made by Quentin Patton, right? Quentin Patton was just on the 49ers last year, returning kicks and catching passes. So people like that. He had 4 receptions, by the way, for 107 yards. So there's legitimate players in this league. And for that reason, I feel like the spring league will probably end up working. But for those who are listening now and say, wow, we recognize a bunch of those names. If you didn't tune in the first week, tune in the second week. I think things are only going to get better. And it's not just a bunch of minor leaguers here. These are guys that had their time in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely, Robbie. And it's interesting because you got all these different types of battles like Big Ten, Hackenberg, and then Brandon Silvers coming in. I think Brandon Silvers is a more talented quarterback from watching both of them play. It's kind of hard to judge, just kind of the caliber of athlete they were going against. But it's a lot of interesting decisions from some of these coaches, and not a lot of data behind it. So it's beatable, so to speak, as far as total sides in the AAF. So hopefully we can get some of the listeners on the right side here, Robbie. We got 2 games left. There's 4 games this weekend. On to the Sunday slate. And guys, remember, it is $9 Monday. If you're listening to this Monday, we got every play discounted to just $9 on sportsmemo.com. But we got Orlando at San Antonio, 4 p.m. on Sunday, Robbie. This one on CBS Sports Network. What do you got for a projected line, and how would you look to bet this one?
Got Orlando on the road, -2. In San Antonio. San Antonio gets to stay at home for the second consecutive week. Head coach Mike Riley. We have plenty of experience watching Mike Riley teams, right? Kind of a West Coast offense, or kind of an NFL-based offense, West Coast system. Saw him at Oregon State, saw him in the end at Nebraska, now here at San Antonio. His offense looked like Mike Riley's offense always looks as far as play calling, as far as philosophy is concerned. Orlando's offense looked like Steve Spurrier's offense looked when he was in college football. They scored 40 points. The 40 points that they scored, Drew, not all attributed to the offensive side of the football. The defense had a pick 6. The defense came through large in that game for Orlando. We talked a little bit about Steve Spurrier being rejuvenated to be a head coach again might be a little bit of an angle. Man, he was fired up. He was mic'd up in that game for those who saw it. And I do remember one particular instance where, Orlando ran a jet sweep and the receiver dropped the football. And a couple series later, they came back and ran the same play. And they had Spurrier mic'd up and he called the play. And he said, run that play and tell him to catch the ball this time.
Yeah, I saw that too.
It was good to hear the old ball coach. But defensively, they forced 4 turnovers. I think if you're going to ask me which team was the most balanced on each side of the football, it had to be Orlando. They're explosive offensively. They take their shots downfield. They run those quick screens that Spurrier used to like. His running game looks like Florida's running game used to look like. But boy, they were balanced on each side of the football. Now, some of that could be attributed to the fact that, Atlanta's no good, but if Atlanta is any good, then it's a really impressive 40-6 win. We'll have to find out down the road how good the Legends are. I think for them, when I went over their 52-man roster last week when I was trying to establish some numbers, I thought that maybe Atlanta would be toward the bottom of the pile here. So it could be that it's just not a very good football team that Orlando took advantage of. But there was distinct differences on the field in that game, Drew. One of them being at the quarterback spot. Orlando started Matt Sims, who was just dreadful in that contest. He was now, before I get too crazy with criticizing Sims, I will say for those who didn't watch, the Orlando defense gave him little to no time all game long. I think they had like 6 quarterback hits in that contest to go with 3 sacks. That there was pressure applied by Orlando, and they've got some of the better D-backs in the league. So I think while Matt Sims didn't play well, and I wouldn't start him, Aaron Murray is his backup from Georgia. It would only make sense that the Georgia kid quarterbacks the Atlanta team. He came in, again, in garbage time. It's hard to tell how he's going to do starting a game, and they had said that the quarterback battle between these two is extremely close. Maybe Murray will get his shot this week. But Orlando dominated from start to finish on both sides of the football here. I make them right now, they and Arizona, the 2 best teams power ratings-wise. Just so you know, I have Orlando. If the game were to be played on a neutral field between they and Arizona, Orlando would be a 0.5 point favorite. So it's near pick 'em between those two. But I do think Orlando's defense really is the deciding factor here between the what we saw to be the 2 best teams over the course of the weekend. They're going to go to San Antonio, which played a real good game against San Diego, Drew, but they had trouble getting it in the end zone. I mean, they had chance after chance after chance, and still at the end of that game, only ahead 15-6. San Diego had a couple of opportunities on their last 2 drives to get back in it, mainly because you're forced to go for 2 if you do score a touchdown, and then you can get, like I said, the onside kick being now a play run from scrimmage. So it was possible for San Diego, whose defense really played well in holding San Antonio out of the offense. But they had a lot of yardage in that game. I'll say that. San Antonio did look pretty good as far as offense is concerned. They just couldn't get in the end zone. That would be the derogatory point of their offensive play. Logan Woodside, you mentioned earlier, he the quarterback of San Antonio, and pretty balanced team. Like I say, it's a Mike Riley offense. You're going to get what you're going to get, but they need to score touchdowns rather than kick field goals. Field goal kicking in this league was really good for the most part. I mean, San Antonio goes 3 for 3 kicking field goals, and San Diego 2 for 2, so 5 field goals attempted, 5 field goals made in that particular game. So we'll see. That should be a real good game, probably your spotlight game of the weekend, Orlando at San Antonio. Like I said, I'd make Orlando a 2-point favorite. And if the number were to come that way, I'd probably bet Orlando. I think from what I saw, they are the best team all around in this league.
Robbie, last game up, Atlanta at San Diego, Sunday night, 8 p.m. on NFL Network. How do you look to bet Atlanta-San Diego here, man?
I'll tell you what, I liked what San Diego showed, and I feel bad somewhat for Mike Martz. They had a scrimmage. Their one scrimmage was against Orlando, and I remember reading the recap of that scrimmage, the article that was written in a Florida newspaper, and San Diego got to the Orlando quarterback consistently in that game. However, Orlando got to their quarterback consistently in that game. And when given time, I remember Spurrier's quote was, "I'm going to have to take some plays from Coach Martz because they ran some stuff that just shredded us when they were able to protect their quarterback." And the same thing happened here in this game. They were unable to protect their quarterback against San Antonio. They allowed 6 sacks for a negative 48 yards. But when they could throw the football, they threw for 244. So San Diego really, to me, they're probably the team right now listed in the bottom echelon, but I think they have the most room to improve. And by the end of the season, knowing Mike Martz's offensive capabilities to call a game, to put plays in that are successful, if they can shore up that offensive line at all, they're going to be a very dangerous team. In this contest, I make them at home in their first home game, 6.5-point favorite over Atlanta, which, as we just discussed, was a complete disaster. You know, Michael Vick was the offensive coordinator for Atlanta for the entire – I mean, he was hired. He went through the entire preseason, installed their offense, and then Friday had to leave the team. He's no longer the offensive coordinator. I think – I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head, Drew, but I think the conflict is that he's an analyst or going to be an analyst for Fox, and therefore Fox pretty much said you can't coach in the league. It's kind of strange to me that they would wait till 2 days before the game or 1 day before the game to kind of realize that Michael Vick can't be your offensive coordinator, but that's the way it went down. I think play calling was kind of mix-mashed in that game for Atlanta, so they've got some things to work out here on the offensive side. I make San Diego 6.5-point favorite. I think all things considered, they are a touchdown better than Atlanta. I'm going to look to that game here because I don't think the number will come 6.5. I think we'll get a little value with San Diego in that game. Don't know that Atlanta has the pass rush capability, the same pass rush capability as San Antonio had. So maybe San Diego can keep the quarterback upright a little bit. Quarterback here, Nick Bercovici. We remember him as a backup at Arizona State and then a subsequent starter at Arizona State, but he got yanked. He threw a couple of interceptions, Drew, down near the goal line that were really backbreakers for San Diego. And they replaced him with Philip Nelson. I know you'll remember Philip Nelson. He played for Jerry Kill at Minnesota. Didn't like it much. Went to East Carolina where they ran a wide-open offense and really excelled. And he looked good in that game. Led the last couple of drives for the San Diego Fleet. So we'll see where their quarterback situation heads. But if it were me, I would choose Nelson. If it were me, I would probably be on San Diego as soon as I see a number on that game.
Good stuff, Robbie. Yeah, Bercovici from Arizona State. We all remember him. And, guys, Robbie, are you going to put out any plays in the AAF for Week 2 or a free play, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I would have this past weekend. We just don't have – our systems aren't set up for it yet. Hopefully they will be. If they're not, we'll get free plays out there. But I think, Drew, like you said it's beatable. I agree with you. If you just look at the results from Week 1 – no game was decided by less than 9 points. Yeah, so they were all pretty big margins.
Point spread didn't matter. I did notice that as far as –
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think reason being, odds makers just don't know where to throw the game, so you throw them around that 4 or 5 range and see where money will carry it. Here we might get a couple of bigger point spreads, but still I think that the range – is there for us to take advantage of. And totals are a work in progress. You really have to – I mean, I've tried to establish a new chart here with what will be key numbers in this league as far as totals are concerned and what won't be key numbers. But it's real difficult. You have to almost chart at this point, which I've started to. You want to chart 2-point conversions, successful and unsuccessful for these teams, and that could be a big part. It's really, numbers-wise, for guys like us that are trying to beat numbers, it takes a little brain work here, and it's a little bit different, and I like that. I like something with a new approach that we have to kind of look at a little differently and find our are different ways to beat it. But I think, as you mentioned a couple of times, it's beatable. That's for sure.
All right, Robbie. Well, went a little bit over on AAF, but we got a little bit of time for college basketball tonight's slate. I know you had something on Kansas. Also, we got a big game, Virginia, UNC, Oklahoma, Baylor. You want to throw out any quick hitters on tonight's college basketball card, Robbie?
Yeah, and for guys betting the games, really the whole thing with Baylor, Oklahoma is injury-wise. Now, I'm going to make the assumption real quick here that perhaps Makai Mason is going to play in this contest. Remember, Baylor was without both their starting guards on Saturday. Both starting guards, game time decision is supposedly, no matter what you read. But Baylor has increased from a 4-point favorite to a 4.5-point favorite. The total's gone up from 38 to 39. So it looks like, just off of numbers, without being able to verify stuff while we've been on the podcast here, Drew, it looks like maybe Baylor's got healthy guards back. For Kansas, of course, Legero Vic takes a leave of absence from the team. Their leading scorer on Saturday didn't matter. They covered the closer against Oklahoma State, won by 12. But here they play TCU tonight. This Big 12 is such a crazy league right now. Anybody could beat anybody on any given night. TCU comes up with over 90 against Iowa State on Saturday in a big win after having scoring trouble. So key injuries or key absences for those two games. The other game, Virginia, North Carolina, of course, everybody knows Virginia, trying to bounce back off of Saturday's loss to Duke. So only three Power 5 games, Drew, but three really, really good ones. Money's come in on Virginia, North Carolina under the number. As I mentioned, Baylor, Oklahoma over the number, and TCU, Kansas attracting a little bit of over money right now.
Robbie Vino. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Vino Sports. Put out his power numbers there. Also on sportsmemo.com. Guys, remember it's $9 Monday. Every play on the website at sportsmemo.com. Discounted to just $9 every Monday. We got 5%ers up there. Robbie's got a couple plays in the NBA and college basketball as well. Look out for his AAF plays on sportsmemo.com. Service or free play style. Just make sure to check it out later in the week. We'll be back tomorrow with another sports betting podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Best of luck with your bets.